Hey, welcome to the Astral Projecting podcast. Today I'm talking with Brian. Brian had his first astral projection experience over 40 years ago when he was just 9 years old. It was totally spontaneous, so as a kid, it scared the hell out of him. Since that time, Brian's gone on to have countless astral journeys, and he's joining us here today to share with us some of his experiences. As you can imagine, he's seen a lot of stuff over the past 4 decades of astral projecting. From random beings walking through the walls of his house, to having conversations with deceased relatives, to even communicating with his own recently deceased mother. He's met with and he's been guided by his guardian, who's taken him to some awesome and fun places and has shown him some really cool stuff, including a giant-sized house cat that's bigger than a fully grown man. So Brian's going to give us a few insights on how we can overcome fear so that we can have our own safe and fun astral journeys. And he's got a few tips on how we can get started if we're totally new to astral projection. I can't wait to hear what Brian's got to share with us. Hey Brian, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
So why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself? Who's Brian? Where are you and what are you doing?
Well, I live in Southern California. I've been in Southern California since I was in my early 20s. I work as I guess in the U.S. here we call them store detectives, store security people. I worked undercover, walked around, that kind of thing. And then, eventually, I've come to the point now where I work at the corporate office of a retail company, and I'm an analyst there. And there are a lot of things that I do enjoy doing. Astral projection has always been kind of a part of my life, but I'm also a very creative person as well. So writing is a part of what I do as well.
Brian, what does astral projection look like to you? What does it mean to you? If I was somebody, I met you in the street and I said, "Oh, Brian, talk to me about astral projection." How would you describe it?
This is the interesting part. Now, I've been leaving my body since the age of 9, and I'm now the age of 55. And so I've been doing it for over 40 years. And
wow. If
you asked me in the beginning when I was 9, 10 years old, I would have told you a completely different thing than I'm going to tell you right now in regards to describing astral projection. I know from the beginning that I had this sense that when you astral project, your spirit being is leaving your body. And so it's like an empty house. You're leaving, and then when you come back, you're going back into this house. So that's what I was thinking of. But over the years, I've come to at least understand within myself that when I astral project, my belief is that I am actually projecting. Now, the old projectors we had when we were young in school, right? They would show films and things like that. They don't do that anymore. But so what my thought is that we're actually projecting our beingness out there, but we're still also in the body. And this idea, at least in my mind, that we're either in one place or we're somewhere else is more of a 3D ideal. What my thought is that we're in both places at once. And one of the reasons why I feel this way, and I believe this deeply, is because there have been times when I have astral projected where I'll have some sort of sound in the background. It hasn't always been something like binaural beats or anything relaxing. Sometimes I've just had talk in the backdrop, and I will reach that space, what I call the sweet spot or the middle space, the space between being asleep and awake, and I'll start to leave, but I can also still hear the sound. I can also feel my body. I can also feel all of these different things. So it's happening simultaneously. I almost think of it like, if you think of 2 speakers, right? If you were able to manipulate 2 speakers and you could turn one speaker up, turn the other speaker down so it's in stereo. So you can listen, maybe you have one song on one speaker, you have another song on another one. So I am able to, at some point when I leave my body, I'm literally, I guess, turning up the knob on the astral projection speaker and turning down the volume on the physical speaker, but I could continue to kind of be sort of in between that. It's confusing, and I found it confusing, but it is possible for me to do that. So I literally think that astral projection, as a description, astral projection is literally projecting your spirit being out into the astral plane.
Okay. That's an interesting take on it. It's very thorough.
Yeah.
So you once had this idea that it's like, okay, we leave the house, we've gone out. Hopefully, when we get back, no one else is there.
Yes. Exactly.
But
Exactly.
and they haven't changed the locks. But you now kind of, after having years of practice of this, you now define it as we're in both places at once, but we've kind of tuned out to the point that it's just very low hum in the background, where we're really just focused our energy in one particular place. That's a really good analogy. How does it differ? So, I mean, we go to sleep, we dream, then, people talk about lucid dreaming. There's obviously deep states of meditation. What's the difference between astral projection and just having a dream, waking up and saying, wow, that felt so real? Because we've all had those dreams. We wake up like, oh my God, that was just so real. What's the difference?
Sure. Let me begin with I think I need to go back. I haven't always lived in Southern California. I lived in Northern California before with my mom, and we first moved there from Chicago when I was 9 years old. And when I first kind of arrived, I don't know, we were living in this apartment, and I don't know if there was anything interesting going on in this apartment or not, but I began actually having lucid dreams as a young child. Now, I didn't understand that this was what a lucid dream was. In my mind, a lucid dream, or dreaming in general, was something that should be able to be controlled. Well, why? Well, because it's inside of us. It's inside of it's who we are, so we should be able to control it. It's a part of us. So that's how I thought of it in my head. And I still remember my first lucid dream that I had when I was 9, 10 years old. I turned my best friend into a dragon, and then I turned him back into a human being. And it was just with a single thought. Now, I remember the feeling of it. I remember the sense of control of being able to do that. Now, I've done other things also in lucid dreams, but when I astral project, it's a different kind of a feeling. It's like I know when I'm in a lucid dream that I'm dreaming, and we all know what a dream feels like. But when I astral project, it's not that feeling. There is a sense of reality, 100% as much of a reality as right now, right this moment, as we're sitting here talking with one another. It's the that kind of reality, but it is actually not the same reality. It's a different reality. So you feel differently. There's a sense when I astral project that I can move with a single thought. I could go anywhere in the universe just by thinking it. I don't think like that, I guess, when I'm in a dream. That's not what I'm thinking at all. Again, I know I'm in a dream, and there's a certain limit there. So for me, it is all about my instincts, the way that I feel when I'm in a lucid dream, as opposed to being in an astral projection experience. To me, it is literally the difference between being awake and asleep. When I'm awake and in the astral plane, that's what it feels like. It feels like I'm awake and hanging out, except again, the reality is different.
So it's real. I could just as easily explain to you about an astral projection experience I had as easily as I could tell you what I just had for breakfast.
Sure, it's a memory, and what you'd find, like I'm sitting here and I'm having a conversation with you. I don't have any notes or anything in front of me, but if you asked me about a specific experience, I will tell you. And it's so funny when I have responded to people, say on the subreddit, let's say. they have told me, they've actually told me, well, it sounds like you are talking about a memory. If I'm explaining an experience I've had, it sounds like you're talking about a memory, and it is a memory. It's a memory of a real thing that happened. It is 100% real.
Like telling somebody about a vacation you went on. It's like,
Sure.
hey, tell me about it. What
Hmm.
were the place? What was the place like? What were the smells? What were the tastes? What were the sounds? So let's talk about your very first astral projection experience. So you're 9 years old.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so this was an accidental. It wasn't intentional. You didn't lay on your back and say, I want to astral project. It just happened. Talk us through it. What happened?
Well, I love this story because there are so many people that come to me, especially either on my channel or on the subreddit, and they talk about their fears about astral projecting. And I always tell them the first time I left my body, I was absolutely terrified. I was so scared the first time, but that was simply because I didn't understand what was happening. So I had a childhood friend. Of course, you and I both know that during the late 70s, there was no internet. So there was no place for me to go and kind of look up or Google anything. There was really no Google. There was nothing like that. We just, I had friends and I talked to my friends. And I had one particular friend. I remember we stayed in this apartment building in Hayward, California. And across from my apartment, there were these other apartments. There was literally this hole in the fence. And I used to go and visit this person. And one day, as kids will do, we were, talking about spirit beings and haunted houses, that kind of thing. And then the whole subject of astral projection came up. And so he starts telling me about astral projection, and he tells me that he's actually experienced astral projection. So I'm listening as a 9-year-old kid. And even back then, I'm a pretty rational being, to be honest with you. Even back then, I was like very doubtful of what he was telling me. I was like, well, I mean, this sounds cool. It sounds like that would be awesome. He was telling me about leaving his body, and there was this hole in the wall of his room, and he was going through it, and it was like a tunnel, it was a portal. And I was just like, okay, this sounds interesting. But again, I was like, I don't know. And then that same night, I go home, and it's in the back of my mind. It's not something that is forefront in my thoughts. I'm not sitting there thinking about it going, God, I'm hoping I can astral project, and it sounds so cool. I was just thinking, it sounds pretty cool, I guess, but this dude, he's making this up. So I lay down that night, go to bed as normal, and at some point, something happened to me that I never recall happening before that. I was lying there. Again, this thought was still in the back of my mind. I wasn't really focused on it. And probably, maybe 15, 20 minutes into lying there was this feeling of a transition. It was like someone flipped a switch. And I went into this place, this middle place, this place that I now call the sweet spot. I've heard the term sleep paralysis before, and it's not a term that I like to use personally because that's not how I feel about it. I feel that once you reach that space, you're transitioning from physical to spirit to the mind, and so your mind takes over movement. So you can still move through thought. So I'm sitting there in this middle place, and I'm like, this is interesting. And then I thought to myself, he had told me, he said, if you want to leave your body, put a white bubble of light around you. That's all he said to me. That was that. There were no other techniques. There were nothing else. It was just put a white light over you. So that's what I did. I imagined it for just a moment. And suddenly I felt this sense, this feeling, like I always like to describe it like static electricity. That's what it felt like. And it started off not so intense, and then it just started growing and growing. And it was like almost like I could hear this crackling sound, and it just spread through my entire body. And I was I gotta tell you, I was in shock. In the very beginning, I was like, I was in disbelief. I'm like, this is not happening. Then I started to rise. And when I started to rise, that's when I really kind of started freaking out a little bit, going, wait a minute, what is going on here? And, a part of me in my brain is like, this is real? This is real? Oh my God. So I'm floating up, floating out of my body, going up. Now, this is all just feeling because I'm so afraid I didn't open my eyes that first time. I could feel all of this happening. I was too afraid to open my eyes. So at some point I went up, and then thank goodness I hit the ceiling. I bumped up against the ceiling. I didn't go through the ceiling. God help me if I would have gone through the ceiling and kept going, because I have no idea what I would have done. But I bumped against the ceiling, and then I flipped around and started flailing my arms like I was drowning. And I started screaming like, oh my God, oh my God. So I'm screaming, I'm flailing my arms. And then suddenly I just stopped. And I tell you, there was a moment of such peace and such tranquility where I just floated there just for a while. And then at some point, I felt this force, powerful force, suddenly pull me back into my body, and my eyes snapped open. And I was like, oh my God. So that was my first experience.
So here you are. You're talking to a friend.
Mhm.
You think he's nuts.
Mhm.
He's
Yes.
like, "Oh, I've got this portal in my bedroom door and in the wall, and I can go to another dimensions." You're like, "Okay, this kid needs therapy, right?"
Yes.
And then you're at home, and then you're laying there, and then suddenly you have this whole your body's paralyzed, and you feel yourself starting to rise up. This whole empty house thing, right? Where you're like, "Hey,
Mhm.
I'm leaving the house. Don't forget to shut the front door." You're now floating out of your body, and you're like, oh my God, everything that kid has told me is actually happening to me. It's real. And I can say, hand on heart, I know the feeling. I've had it, and it freaks the hell out of you, doesn't
Oh
it?
yeah.
Because you're like, I don't even know what's going on. I can't move. My body's paralyzed. Am I having a stroke? Am I dying?
Mhm.
And now you're floating around in the house, and you're literally flying. So, here's a 9-year-old kid who's out of his body. He's flapping around like flying around the house. It doesn't surprise me. It would have freaked the hell out of you. So how did you go from that to then having some fun and relaxing out-of-body experiences? So how do you move from having a really frightening experience to then saying, you know what, I'm going to have another crack at this?
Well, I tell you, Brent, time, that's
Mm.
what it is. It takes time. It takes time, and it takes patience. Now, the first time it happened, after that time, I was scared. And it took me probably a while before I started thinking about doing it again on purpose. But this was starting to happen spontaneously. So there was some reason why I met this person, some reason why this person told me about this. And I tell you, it was like after it happened spontaneously a few times, I started kind of becoming accustomed to it. One of the things that I did to get used to it, and one of the things that I've recommended to people who are experiencing astral projection spontaneously, is instead of going all the way out, I got this sort of under control where I was able to stop myself from going completely out of my body and kind of hover, sort of over it. And then I was able to kind of reach out. And what I would do is I would touch my floor of my room and the rug. And I still remember the feeling of the rug, how it felt. I would just rub it because I could actually feel it. And then I would kind of extend my fingers so that they were pointing toward the floor, and then I would penetrate the rug and the floor. I'd feel that feeling of the rug and the floor, feeling it, inside of it, and then I would pull my fingers out, and then I would go back into my body. And so I did this a couple of times. I wasn't going out completely. I kind of compare this in a way to if you're going swimming and you're kind of dipping your toe in the water to test it to see if it's cold or not. In a way, I guess I was feeling more comfortable and more confident as um, uh, I would, go out there, I would touch things or whatever, and then I would come back and then I would venture out further. And over time, I started going out and I would be in my room and I'd hang out in my room. And it was so interesting because things didn't look the way they looked in the physical world. They were different. So, but still, it was so interesting. It was so exciting. And so then I would start to go out into the living room. And this is when I had a few experiences where I actually saw other spirit beings. In the very beginning, I wasn't seeing anyone else. And I have a feeling that my guides were sort of keeping me or protecting me from that in a way. They were kind of there and they were isolating me a bit. And then eventually, slowly but surely, I would see other spirit beings around. I remember at one point I was rising out of my body spontaneously and I looked over toward the wall and this being had a greenish tinge to him, walked through the wall. I saw him walk through the wall. He walks right by me, ignores me completely, and then walks into another wall and disappears. And I went back in my body and I was like, oh my God, what did I just see? But the important thing was, did this being try to harm me? Did this being try to grab me? No. This being was in their own world. So slowly I was beginning to, I guess, realize that the astral plane wasn't necessarily a scary place. This was not some place to be afraid of. And over time, I just became more and more confident. Now, I want to make sure that you know that in my teens, though I was still scared, I was scared to do it at night. I was scared of all these different things because I watched too many horror movies. But over time, I was patient. I kept going and it just got better and better. And this is what I recommend to people all the time. If you're afraid, take your time. First of all, you're not in a rush. The astral plane isn't going anywhere. Take your time, one step at a time. If you don't want to go completely out of your body, you don't have to. Go slowly and then, venture out there a little bit by little bit. And, just eventually you'll get used to it, you'll get comfortable, and you'll be able to go to amazing worlds.
That'd freak the hell out of me. So from one moment, you're 9 years old, you're having a bit of an out-of-body experience. You're like, wow, this is crazy. You make it to the roof, you hit the roof, you start flying around the house. So you think, okay, I'll have another crack at that. Now you start seeing green people walking through your walls. Oh my goodness. I just think, those that are getting started in astral projection, they're thinking, I don't want to see other beings. And I liken that. I read in a book, I think it might have been William Buhlman's book or somebody like that, where it's like, that is just a crazy thought. If you're saying you don't want to encounter other beings in the astral plane, is like saying, I want to dive into the ocean, but I don't want to see any fish.
Exactly.
Because it's like, hello, it's like I want to go through the main street of the city, but I don't want to bump into any people. It doesn't work like that. So how did you feel? So you saw this other being and you kind of realized that, okay, this dude's just going about his own business. He's just, he's just cool. He's walking through my walls and all that. And you're okay with that.
Yeah. You know what? I'm perfectly fine. Again, when it first happened in the very beginning, of course, I'm freaking out. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Somebody just walked through my wall. But after some time went by, and by the way, I did have another experience, and the other experience I think made it better. Again, this was, I want to tell you, Brent, this was an evolution. This was not something that happened overnight. And this is what I try and tell everybody. There was a particular night when I was resting and I felt myself spontaneously leaving my body. And I remember I sat up as my spirit being, and out of the door of my room, I saw a being. Now, this being had a sort of a bluish color, and I saw chains wrapped around it. And I was like, what the heck? And it was moving slowly. And so it kind of reminded me, I think, of the Ghost of Christmas Past or something. That's what I thought of. I don't know why I thought of this. So I see this being wrapped in chains, has a blue glow to it, walks by through my hallway, and I'm like, what in the universe? So I go out, and of course, being curious, I go to follow. So I go out, I'm out of my body. I'm walking toward the kitchen, and instead of seeing a blue being, I see this small woman. She's black. She has a mole on her her right cheek. I'll always remember what this lady looked like. And when she saw me, she started asking me all kinds of questions about my mom, about my family. How's everything going with the family? How's everything? And I was still a kid, so I was just like, okay, I don't know who this woman is, but sure, family's doing fine, everything's great, whatever. So
Glad you asked.
yeah, and we ended up talking for a while, and then at some point, this was weird. She suddenly grabbed my wrists right after we were talking, and she just said, "Our time is over. Our time is done." And right after that, bam, right back into my body, opened my eyes. I told my mom about this. Mom said that it sounded like an aunt that had passed away years and years ago. And after that, I was like, okay, this isn't this. There was still some scariness there, but again, the fear was slowly going away because I was having experiences and I was coming back into my body and everything was fine, and they were becoming more and more interesting.
Where were you? So when you were talking to this woman, where were you at the time? Like, were you in your house or were you in a street?
Oh no, I was in my apartment. So literally, I just walked up to my kitchen, the kitchen in my apartment,
and she came to you.
Yeah, she was waiting. She was waiting there for me.
Wow. And she had questions of you.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, I got a few of my own questions I wouldn't mind asking.
Yeah, exactly. But
who the heck are you and why are you in my kitchen? Wow.
Exactly. But, as a kid, it's like, whatever. I mean, I feel like I'm talking to an adult. This person doesn't seem dangerous or anything. I know I'm out of my body. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm just like relaxed and kind of like, oh yeah, family's doing fine. Everybody's fine. And, it's like, yeah. Anyway.
We're good. Thanks for asking. How's everything with you guys? So you started to realize that you had full control. That's the key here, is that you had control. You were, and I really am intrigued that when you put your foot on the floor, you could feel. So you felt the carpet underneath your feet. So you still had feeling as well.
Sure, I could feel stuff. I mean, it wasn't the same though. As I was saying about reaching out and touching the floor, like I could feel stuff, but it's not the same thing as touching something in your skin. It's not the same thing because you have a sense that you can penetrate it. There's a sense that you can move through it, but you can still feel things. Yes, I can anyway.
So you wake up, you go and talk to people your friends, your family, mum, dad, whatever. How do they respond to this? Like, oh, by the way, I leave my body now and I talk to potentially dead people or blue people, green people, you name it. What do they think? Were they signing you in to take you to go and see a doctor?
Oh, well, thankfully, my mother at the time was already a very spiritual being herself. She, in fact, was the person who took me to go see my first psychic years and years ago. She took me to San Francisco to the psychic fair. So she understood this stuff, though I was still hesitant to really talk to her about it. I mean, I asked her about this whole thing that happened with the with the woman I saw in the kitchen, but that was years later, and I was kind of shy about doing it. And I'm not sure why that was, because over the years, mom is why I actually created a YouTube channel in the first place. So I don't know why I was hesitant about talking with her about it, because she was always a very open person. By the way, I say was because my mom passed away in March 26th. So that's why she's left the planet. But when she was on the planet, very open-minded person. In regards to my friends, thankfully, I didn't have any real close-minded friends, to be honest. Most were the ones that were close to me were very, very open-minded. The ones that I didn't think would understand what I was talking about, I wouldn't talk about it. I would just not mention it. But the people that I spoke to about it either understood, and I literally I found out also that my mom had her own astral projection experience at some point. So perhaps it was all passed down to me. I'm not 100% sure of that. I don't know how that works, but she told me about her own projection experience back in the day. So, they reacted. It was a very positive reaction, to be honest.
Have you seen or spoken with your mum since she's passed?
Yes. And this is an interesting thing. I've done this a couple of times, and Vern, I'm glad you asked this question, because people have asked me about this, and I see this sometimes on the subreddit. People talk about wanting to reach out to their loved ones that have passed on, and I've been able to do it. I've reached out to my grandmother before, and I've communicated with her. It was interesting because she took the form of literally a 10 or 11-year-old kid. I still knew it was her, though, when I saw her. So that was interesting. But I can tell you this. In the 2 times that I've communicated with her, it has been brief. But the other part to this is that it is not the same as picking up the phone and talking with someone. It just really isn't. For me, there was a sense that I knew, because my mom, ultimately what I came to realize, because we became closer and closer over the years, what I became to realize was my mother's a very unique being, very spiritual, and my thought is that she doesn't even really have a form out there. She's just pure energy at this point. But in our communication, it kind of made me realize more that she was gone, And just because you can communicate with someone that is a loved one, it doesn't mean that, I don't know how to really say it. It's just very difficult. It really is. It isn't like being on the phone, and you do come to realize that this person is gone. And I think what I wanted to say was that you still have to mourn that loss. You still have to go through that. And that's what I really want people to understand. It's been tough. It's been difficult. When my belief is that when you actually leave your body for good, when you're gone, there's a transition that happens, and there's probably a place where you go that's even beyond being able to get to through astral projection. But I think things change because you begin to understand and realize who you really are. And in the end, I believe we are infinite beings. And that's a huge thing to think about. But my mom, the part of that being that is my mom, is gone. And that's what I kind of have to deal with. I'm certainly, in my communications with her, we have talked, and, obviously she is still in some sense my mother, but she is so much more now. And so it's been tough. It's been difficult, but and my communications with her have been quite beautiful. But yeah.
it's understandable that you are going to miss her in the physical world. You've lost your mother as a physical being. That is somebody that you can just pop in and have a cup of tea and a chat and those sorts of things. You must have a lot of peace that other people wouldn't have because you've astral projected and you've been into other realms. You understand that we are immortal, we are eternal, we live in a multi-dimensional reality. So you must have a peace that others wouldn't have, knowing that your mother, although that she's gone in the flesh, is in a good place.
Yeah, by the way, she would be very happy about all of this right now. Me sitting and chatting with you. And yeah, um, there is a peace within me for that. But again, there is also an understanding. By the way, this is something I also always tell people about astral projection or any other experiences I've had. With each experience, I feel as if I will discover things, but with each experience, I feel like I have more questions than answers. Almost every
Mm.
single time. Anyone that asks me, it's so funny. um, People have asked me what have you learned through astral projection and whatnot, and I tell people, I learned that I don't know really anything. I learned that I don't
Oh, yeah.
understand anything because the vastness of it is so overwhelming. It really is. And
Yes.
my mom is in a place, I believe, where she understands all that. And at that point, with that transition, well, again, she's a part of her is still my mom. The other part is more. And that is an interesting thing to consider as well. So.
As soon as you open up a new chapter, you kind of realize how much you don't know. It's like you said, you and I are the same age. We grew up in the
Mhm.
70s. We didn't have internet. I only had one channel on my television. We eventually got to two.
Yeah.
uh, you know, and that was life for us, and everything was great. And I'll tell you what, I would love to go back to those days. Things were easy, things were
Sure.
simple, because now that we've got all this information and the internet and just, we've now got robots and, artificial intelligence and all that kind of thing, suddenly we realize how little we actually do know. And we've got all this information, but we can't access. There's
Yeah.
just too much,
Mhm.
way too much.
Mhm.
So I get what
Mhm.
you're saying.
Mhm.
On the surface, we would say, "Oh, well, Brian, you must know everything because you've astral projected, you've spoken to other entities. Tell us what you know. What did you learn? What do you know?" And you realize now it's like, wow, I'm only scratching the
Exactly.
surface, and it's a kind of a whole new can of
Mhm.
worms. But it would have changed your life. I mean, how did it change your life so that, I don't know about your upbringing, but as a kid, I was taught there's a God, there's a heaven, there's a hell. We do good, we go to heaven. We do bad, we go to hell. That's obviously not true for you. And how did that change your life or your perspective of what you thought you
Well,
knew?
it's interesting. I grew up in a Baptist household. And it was a pretty strict Baptist household. My grandmother was a very religious person, and of course I carried that in my head, and I can remember when I started astral projecting and doing these things, I had this feeling of fear and guilt, like, what if I'm doing something wrong? What if, this is the devil's work or some business like that? So I'm sitting here
Mm.
and I'm just really struggling with this. And again, over time, and kind of honestly, self discovery, discovering who I am. And, if you ask me, the biggest lesson that astral projection has taught me is that as a being, I am infinite, and there's so much more to me than just this physical body, and that is so important. That has helped me to get past all of these things, plus experiences within themselves. The experiences of seeing the things I've seen have helped me to understand that it's more than just the Bible. And I know that people at that time, they needed that. They needed the Bible. They needed that as something to hold on to. But there is so much more. And so I would say the most important lesson that astral projection has taught me is something that is more inside. I know people I will see people writing questions like, if I astral project or do something like that, can I learn another language? Can I do this? Can I do that? I don't know about all that, but astral projection has taught me about me and taught me about loving myself, which to me, and this is something that I've stressed on my channel before, is a very, very important thing. If you want to get out there, you want to astral project, first and foremost, you got to love yourself, because you're going to see a lot of yourself out there.
So you've come to realize through your own personal experiences, as you said, we are eternal, and you've learnt a lot about yourself. I would say unequivocally, you don't fear death at all.
No. You know what? I don't fear death. You know what's interesting, Brent? I'll be completely honest with you here. You know, for some reason, I've always been afraid of the infinite, of never ending, of going on and on. And I thought to myself, what is that like? What is it like not to have a limit? You know, in our lives here, everything is like, you know, in regards to time, like I had to, you know, meet up with you at a certain time, and everything is all about time. And, you know, at some point, these physical bodies, our time runs out. But what is it like to be infinite, and what is infinity? What is that? And when I think about that, that kind of scares me a little bit because I don't understand it. But in regards to death itself, I 100% have the understanding that it is a transition. Though I will also say this, and I want to emphasize this. This is my belief. I don't know how others feel, but just because I can astral project doesn't mean I know exactly what happens after we die. That is, to me, a big thing, because I think there's a point, again, and this was something I was kind of speaking about earlier, there's a point that spirits that have moved on, there's a point that they go to where I don't believe we can go even when we can astral project. And so I think there's a lot that we don't understand about death. I know I don't understand it because I haven't died, but I can sort of formulate theories from what I've seen and the interactions that I've had. I can formulate theories of what I believe it is, but who knows when it actually happens? I'll find out someday, but who knows?
Well, we've never had anybody come back from the dead, have we? I mean, we've had people that have had near-death experiences. We've had people that have astral projected. We've never had anybody who said, oh, look, I was dead for a few years and here I am, I'm back.
Of course not. No.
So nobody can unequivocally, hand on heart, say, I know exactly what happens. We can all, I guess, surmise what may happen. And you've hit the nail on the head, because you've said, you know, there is another place where we can't go when we astral project. Is your gut feeling, and also you touched on this whole eternity. I think that scares all of us because we don't know. We're afraid of the unknown. So I'm, like you, have been of the opinion like, oh, I don't really know if I want to live forever. What if I don't like it? What can I do about it? You know, it's like, because we're so used to time and wearing out, and, you know, I'm 55 now, I'm starting to get a bit tired. I'm like, oh my goodness, how much longer can I do this? And so everything is finite on the planet Earth. You know, we buy a car, we know we're gonna get 10 years out of it if we're lucky. Everything's all about time, and everything rusts and ends up, you know, we throw things out and we replace it. So when we try to wrap our head around this whole eternity, it scares us, because we're like, oh, I don't know if I want to live forever, because that's a long time. I can't grasp it. I can't understand it. So your interpretation of time, and this does my head in, because people that say, oh, you know, when I astral project, I just realize there is no time. And I've heard that, you know, so many times. How would you describe a place where there's no time? How do you even wrap your head around that?
When I'm out there having experiences, I can tell you that I don't feel the same kind of sense of time, but I can't really describe it to you how it actually feels. I mean, it's like when I astral project, and this is something I was speaking about earlier, all I have to do is think to be somewhere and I can be transported there. And there's no sense that it's going to take a certain amount of time to happen. It just happens.
Are you going to get bored with that in eternity? Are you going to be like, yeah, okay, I've been there, I've done that, I can go anywhere, and you're going to be doing that forever? Is that something you're going to get
Yeah,
bored with?
I don't believe I will, because I honestly believe that I am a traveler, and that's something that I tell people on the subreddit, and I've told people on my channel. I am a traveler. I always say I'm not a guru, I'm not a teacher, because people will ask me, well, how can you teach me how to do it? And I've had people say, I'll pay you, and
Oh,
number one, I would never, ever in my
wow.
life, ever accept finance, money, or anything like that. My channel, the YouTube channel that I have, Astral Plane and Beyond, that is me giving back because of the incredible access that I have. So you would never see anything that says, donate money or do anything like that, because this is me giving back, really, truly sharing my stories. And if I can help others like myself, then great. That's a really great thing. And that's why the channel is there.
And we appreciate you for it. That's awesome. Getting back to these dying,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't fear it, although you don't know
Mm-hmm.
what happens. You've probably got better insight than most of us. Do we go to a good place?
I think that depends on us. I really do. This is my belief. This really depends on us. People are very afraid to take their power. And this is another thing. This is another purpose of my channel, is I want to empower people with their experiences in astral projection and other types of experiences. I want to empower people, because if you aren't empowered, then other people will take your power from you. So this is a very, very important thing. Power, taking your own power, and it's a very, very important thing to me.
And you're not the first to say that. That there are some negative energies out there that try to steal our power, and it's something we should be very mindful
Hmm.
of.
Hmm.
So if we're a weak personality or weak in the spirit or something, it could potentially be a dangerous place for us.
You know what? In regards to the astral realm, I've had some interesting experiences in the astral realm. The vast majority have been positive, but there have been some kind of weird experiences that I've had. I think it's important for us, before we leave our bodies, to be in a place of feeling confidence. We're not going to be, I don't think, completely perfectly confident, but it's important that we feel that way, that we're not, drowned in fear thinking about it, because I've seen people on the subreddit saying, I'm so afraid to do this, and I don't think you should be leaving your body when you're like that. But I think with the power, the sense of power, I really do believe that there's people that will offer to teach you and say, we're going to charge this much money to, help you to astral project, when the power is already inside of you to do it. Now, this is just my belief, and I'm sure that there would be people that disagree with this, but I feel strongly about this, that you shouldn't be paying people to help you to get out of your body when you have the power to do it.
Well, it's kind of a contradiction, because what you're trying to do is astral project to take responsibility and power over yourself. Whereas if you're paying somebody else to help you, you're kind of giving that power to somebody else, which is kind of a dichotomy, isn't it?
Yes, I completely 100% agree. And again, I've had certain episodes on my YouTube channel where I will tell my audience, hey, I'm getting up on a soapbox for a moment, and I'm just going to tell you, you need to hold on to your power. You can do this. You don't don't give that power away to someone else. And by the way, taking that power and owning it is a scary thing. People don't want to have the responsibility of having power. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with, death and what happens after we die, at least in my theory. We are in control of all that stuff. If we want to come back, we can come back. If we want to stay out there and do whatever, we can stay out there and do whatever. It's up to us. But I think that people are afraid to have that control, that power. And so they avoid it. And so they give it to someone else. They say, oh no, that being has the power to do that. But I believe that we have that power.
I think we're afraid of making mistakes, and it's nice to have somebody else to blame. If we're all not afraid of power, we wouldn't have governments, would we? We kind of elect people and say, you do it, you stand up, you be the boss, you tell us what to do, we'll follow you. And that just kind of stems on from our whole life experience. So how often, Brian, do you astral project now that you're, a man in your 50s?
I had this accident in 2015. Before then, I'd been astral projecting regularly. I'd been having all these different experiences, going to all these different places, these different worlds. And but astral projection at that point, I wasn't thinking about making a channel or anything. It was just something that I did, like, I don't know, going out and playing basketball or tennis or something like that. It was like I did it pretty much on a weekly basis. It was kind of a cool thing. I didn't go around sharing it to a lot of people, whatever. So then I have this motorcycle accident in 2015, June 6th of 2015 to be exact. I almost died. And after this accident, this weird thing started happening. And again, this never happened with astral projection. What was happening was when I was tired, I'd shut my eyes and I was seeing things. It was immediate. It wasn't like there was a moment between there, like I could go into a dream state. I would shut my eyes and I was seeing places that I didn't recognize. I was seeing oceans, forests, all these places. I was like, what is this? What's going on? Eventually, after I'd gotten out of the hospital, and I spent months, and it was one of the most traumatic things that happened to me. It was one of the hardest times of my life. When I finally had gotten home, and by the way, I was thinking to myself, man, maybe this is like the drugs they were giving me for the pain. I don't know. But then I'd been off the pain meds for quite some time. And I continued to have these experiences, especially in the morning. In the morning, I would wake up for a moment and then I would close my eyes and then I would see stuff. And it was like looking through a window. Well, eventually this started to become, I started to go from being the observer to actually being in the place. Like, I can remember one of the earlier experiences being where I was, suddenly on this sidewalk, and I was there as like a child, like a toddler. And because I remember there were all these legs walking by, and I saw stockings and high heels and pants, suit pants. And I was looking at from the perspective of a child, and I was just there for a moment. And then I opened my eyes and I was like, what the heck is going on? So I remember I was in contact with my mom and I said, Mom, I think I'm going crazy. And my mom's like, well, what's going on? And so I started telling her what was starting to happen. And Mom being mom, she told me, keep an open mind. Number one, son, you are still rational. You are still sane. Everything's fine. I don't know exactly what's going on, but keep your mind open. And as time went on, this thing became more and more interesting. I got to tell you, Brent, even more interesting at times than astral projecting, because it was the sense was, and let's get into the difference here, the sense in astral projection, while there is a certain sense of being kind of solid, you feel very light. I feel very light when I astral project. I feel like I can move from one space to the other with a single thought. In this other experience that my mom and I called beyond body, in this other experience, because this was the only way we could describe it, there was a sense I was in an actual body walking around, which was completely different than astral projection. Plus, when I would have these experiences, there was no sense of separation. So when I astral project, there was a sense I could roll out of my body, I could rise up out of my body. But I wasn't feeling that. I was just feeling this sense of motion. And this sense of motion would just increase more and more and more. It was like being on a roller coaster. And then suddenly I would begin to slow down in darkness. The darkness would lift and I would be in some other reality. And I would be walking around as if I was in a body. So anyway, I don't want to go too far into it at this point, but.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay, we definitely need to have another chat. That's amazing. And you know what? Just listening to that story, I mean, you and I have a lot in common. I mean, we're the same age. I also had a really horrific motorcycle accident. Mine was in 2016. I had a head-on with a car, and I ended up in the hospital for 3 months and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah,
Yes.
very similar. We're on a very similar path. But I unfortunately can't close my eyes and be in other places. I wish I could. I would have to think that what goes through the minds of people who don't astral project is, wow, this sounds amazing. And if you can astral project, isn't it something you just want to do all the time, like every night? I mean, hello, in the real world, we've got to get up, we've got to have breakfast and go to work and trudge around in this heavy body. Whereas we can almost put on this superhuman powers and,
Yeah.
fly,
Sure.
be in other places, talk to other people. Is it not something that you just want to do all the time?
I always love to give examples. There was a specific night where I had 2 or 3 experiences in one night, which was the most I've ever had. And I gotta tell you, Brent, my mind was completely exhausted. This is the whole thing with astral projection. And this is what I tell people, because people will say, I want to do it every single day. I want to do it every single hour. When we astral project, what happens is our minds are aware and awake at a time that they should be resting. Our minds should be resting, right? So we go into this state where our minds are going to sleep and then the subconscious takes over, whatever. But when we're astral projecting, we're still conscious. So if you do that every single night, the mind
Right.
needs to rest. And so after doing it once or twice or something like that, I always kind of consciously say, okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm not going to, continue to try and do this. Plus my guides kind of will say you're going to take a break anyway. So it is what it is. But so your mind needs to rest. And I remember 2 or 3 times in one night and I was mentally exhausted, even though my body was resting, my mind was not. So that's why I don't think I could do it every day.
Yeah, okay, that answers the question, because I sort of would have been under the assumption
Mhm.
it's like kind of like dreaming. We go to sleep, we dream, we wake up, we
Mhm.
remember our dreams. We're like, wow, but we feel rested. Obviously, when you're astral projecting, you're not dreaming.
Mm.
You are like literally somewhere else. And so you're going to wake up, you're going to be shattered, and you've got to get up and go to work. And you're like, wow, I haven't had
Exactly. I
any
mean, I
sleep
think
yet.
people have this thing in their mind that sleep only involves their body. No, it also involves your mind. Your mind needs rest.
Yeah, yeah. What's been one of your favorite experiences?
I will tell you about 2 experiences that I had in the beginning, that when I first started connecting with my guides, that were the most interesting in that moment. And they're most interesting because it was the first time that I allowed my guides to guide me. So I left my body at one point. This was probably, this was back in, when I was in my 30s. Came out of my body. And I came out with the intention for the first time of contacting my guides. And I said, as soon as I got out of my body, I said to my guides, and it was in my thoughts, I said, take me someplace cool. That's all I said. Within the blink of an eye, if less than that, I was orbiting a planet that was very similar to Earth. And I was like, oh my God. And I saw these giant spheres, and they had some sort of something on top of them that almost looked like wings to me, but there were these giant spheres, and they were everywhere. They were everywhere, and they were all orbiting this planet. There were so many of them. And I was looking at the spheres, and I was like, okay, maybe these are satellites. So I glided toward one of the spheres, and there was a window embedded into the sphere. I looked into the sphere, and I tell you, Brent, it was somebody's house. No joke. All of these spheres were houses, and they were orbiting the planet. And once I realized that, I was like, oh my, and I literally said this, oh my God. And as soon as I said that, bam, snap, I was right back into my body again. That was one of the coolest experiences. Well, I've had really, I would have to say I've had even cooler experiences than that. But that was, up to that point, it was like, oh my God. The other experience I had was I allowed my guides to kind of take me again. It was this request to take me someplace cool, not saying anything specific. And suddenly I found myself, went from my room to gliding in this field. And this was the first time I realized that my sight when I was out there was really crystal clear. I always like to say HD on steroids. It's like so crystal clear. It's not even funny. So we're gliding in this field, and up ahead, I see a clearing, and it was near a tree. There was a clearing, and there was, kid you not, a house cat that looked like it was the size of a man, and it was just roaming around this area. And I'm like, what the heck? The other thing I noticed as we were starting to close in on this giant house cat, the other thing that I noticed was that its eyes, I couldn't see its eyes, but there were lights projecting from the place where its eyes should be. And it looked like it was foraging or searching for something on the ground. At some point, I came to a point where I was still kind of a distance away, but not too far. And we stopped. My guides had me. And I said, hello. And this being, this creature, whatever it was, started to tilt its head upwards because its head was down. It started to tilt its head upwards. But before it could bring its head up and before I could see its face, my guides, I could feel them pulling me back. And we were moving like gangbusters. It was like really fast. We were moving towards it. And then I found myself like back in my body within like moments after this. And so I was just kind of left to think, I don't know what this being was. Maybe this being might have been dangerous. I don't know. But I think that they just wanted to show me. And I don't know that they wanted me to say hello and to get this creature's attention. Yeah, they just wanted to show it to me. So I don't know. Those were two really cool experiences that I've had.
Wow, that's crazy. And you sound like you had an awesome time because when you're relaying the story, you're really there, aren't you? What can you tell us? What can you leave us with? So you get a lot of people asking you all the time, like, wow, how can I do this? How can I get started? People have even offered you money. People think you're some kind of guru because you can astral project, which, as you've clearly said, you're not, you don't want to be. We all have this power within us to be able to do it.
Yes.
What practical advice can you give to the listeners who are saying, man, I want to do this. I want to have some of these experiences. What's the best step for us?
Well, first I want to tell you that I am not a big reader of astral projection books. I always tell people that anything and everything I tell you and anything I've shared with you today is based solely on my experience. That's it. This is not based on books or anything like that. But my advice is this. I would say, number one, there are people out there that are way too intense about this. I always tell people some of the coolest, best experiences I've had is when I haven't invested a lot of energy into it, that I'm just relaxed. I'm just chilled out. A lot of people in this day and age, in the 21st century, they want a method. They want a technique. They want something that's going to work every single time. Well, look, for me, as far as I'm concerned, there is nothing like that. And there are no shortcuts. This is something that takes time and commitment, and you really have to be committed to doing it. The number one thing in my mind to begin with, and again, a lot of the folks out there that promote astral projection or even trying to make money off of it, they're not going to say this. But I'm going to tell you, first and foremost, you need to take a look inside of yourself. You should first ask yourself, why? Why do I want to astral project? What is it that I want to see? What are my goals? Do I want to explore? Do I want to connect with other beings? That is step number one. That also includes really establishing a relationship with you and really doing everything you can, doing the best you can to love yourself, because there are so many people that don't. And as I said before, you're going to find a lot of you out there. So it's good to have a relationship with you. So those are the first things. Now, the big thing that's going to come up, and the folks that are listening now are going to be thinking to themselves, fear, I'm afraid. And again, the only thing I can tell you is this takes time, but I would not recommend you start trying to do this when you're terrified, okay? I wouldn't do that because the astral plane is all about thought, and you may conjure something or create something based on that fear, because we are powerful beings, and we might create something that is something that would scare us. We actually scare ourselves. So we need to get our fear under control. Now, once we have been able to do this, then it's very important that we're able to get into a quiet place where we can relax. You can put on any kind of music. I don't have any recommendations for binaural beats or something else. Anything that relaxes you. And in your mind, of course, you want to put that out there in the universe like a bubble. Just let it go. Just say, hey, look, I want to astral project. But you're not obsessed with it. You're not sitting there thinking about it every second. You just let the universe know this is what I'd like to do. And you're confident within yourself that it's going to happen, but you're not, again, you're not obsessed with it. Now, when you put that out there to the universe and you relax, you may or may not succeed that one time. Now, again, with methods, I could tell you to put a bubble of light around you and imagine that, but that may or may not work. I don't know if it would work for everyone. It worked for me in that moment, but ultimately the key for me is reaching that in-between place. And that can be difficult. Now, I see this as when we're conscious, we're standing on a bridge, right? And so we're standing on this bridge. On the other side of the bridge is the dream world. And in between, in the middle of this bridge, is the place where we can astral project. Your goal is to reach the middle part. And then once you reach that middle part, it is possible for you to be able to leave your body. Now, how do you do this? This is a very difficult thing. It's not an easy thing. One of the things that you might try doing is just laying down, relaxing, but trying to stay aware as you're relaxing. You're just chilling out. Many of my experiences have happened when I just lay down and I just want some quiet time, and I'm just kind of laying there. I'm just kind of hanging out. I'm not necessarily thinking about it. Maybe it's in the back of my mind, and then it happens. I reach that middle space and I'm able to leave my body. But this is a process. This takes patience. It takes work. It's something that I don't know if everyone will be able to achieve it. And this is another thing. There have been people that I've heard say anybody and everybody is going to be able to achieve this. Well, not in my mind, not everybody will be able to do it, because there'll be people that will give up. There'll be people that get tired of it because they're not getting it within a month or two or a year or something like that. For anything that's worth achieving takes time and work. And that's the most important, or a very important part of this. But again, the most important part to me is establishing that foundation of loving yourself and really going within yourself and asking why I want to astral project, and start from there.
We live in a world of instant gratification. So, of course, everything's instant. We can just, and you know, and I know because we grew up in the 70s where things used to take time.
Yes.
Whereas now everything's instant. We have instant access to information. We have information overload. We want to give up our control and give it to other people. We want other people to do things for us. So it doesn't surprise me that there are people making money out of this, because it's like, yeah, there are people that'd be like, hey, if I can just slip you $100, can you make me astral project? And of course, as you've highlighted, that is not possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's within ourselves. It's a journey.
Mm-hmm.
I first had an out-of-body experience 30 years ago. I kind of wish now that I had continued with it, because I've wasted 30 years, but obviously I wasn't ready. And we need to do it when we're ready, and it doesn't scare us, and we're ready to have that experience. Brian, I'm just looking at the clock and I'm thinking, for a half hour discussion, and I don't know how much this is going to be edited down, but we're almost at an hour 20, and I could talk for another hour 20. This has been an amazing conversation. You're very engaging. I love your storytelling. You've got some amazing stories, and I've no doubt we're only just scratching the surface. So I think we will need to have another chat down the track. And I know that you're really outlined to us that you're not about money, and you want to give back. Where can people find out more about you? So where's your YouTube channel, and what can we find on there?
Well, if you go to YouTube and you actually type in Astral Plane and Beyond, you will find my channel. And on my channel, I share experiences, like as we were sitting and talking. Many times I'll wake right up after, or I'll open my eyes right after an experience, and I'll get right on my computer and I'll share my experience right then and there when it's fresh. That's what I love doing. So I do that, but I also I have this thing called on Sundays. I do this thing on Sundays where I'll just talk about different theories that I have. I'll try and assist those that are trying to either astral project or shift or whatever. I'll talk about different things, different thoughts in my head, that kind of stuff. But that's what you'll find. And if you're interested in hearing more experiences, you can also hear them there. So, yeah.
Wow. Sounds amazing. So it's kind of like your living journal that you're just leaving open for us all to jump in and have a listen to. That's amazing.
Sure. It is.
Yeah, great.
It is.
Brian, it's been an absolute treat having you here today. I really appreciate you dropping by and having a chat with us. I've learned a lot. I've taken away a lot of fun experiences from this, so I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much, Brent. And this has been an amazing first interview for me, and I hope that your audience enjoys it. I really do.
I can't believe it's your first. You're a natural.
All right. Thank you so much, Brent.
Wow. What an amazing story. So that was Brian. And man, that guy has had some amazing journeys in the astral realm over the last 4 decades. If you've enjoyed this show, subscribe, because I've got a lot of these interesting stories coming up. I'm going to be talking with real people who have had real experiences astral projecting, and I'm just excited to hear them, and I know you are too. So hit subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. Let's build this show, let's build this community into something fun and exciting, so we get to have lots of chats with these interesting people like Brian, who are happy to share their astral projecting journeys with us. Thanks for listening.